I'm here today with Bonny Specker and Natalie Thiex from South Dakota State University, who are going to give us an update on COVID-19 this week. Natalie is going to give us a vaccine safety lesson, and Bonny is going to update us on what has been going on with COVID-19 over the last week. Natalie, what do you have for us today?
Hi, thanks, Chelsea. As you know, last week we talked about vaccine efficacy, or how well the currently available vaccine works. So this time I would like to talk about vaccine safety. And people are very interested in vaccine safety because the currently approved vaccine, the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, as well as the Moderna vaccine, which was approved last week, are both RNA vaccines. And this is a brand new technology that we have not used before. So the technology itself has been around for about 20 years and in development for about 20 years. But these are the first two vaccines to be authorized by the FDA using this technology. So it's something that people have been following. So I wanted to give a brief update about how the technology works and then explain what the data says about the safety. So just like every other vaccine, it's administered by, well, not every other vaccine, like most vaccines, it's administered by a shot to the arm, or it's an intermuscular injection. And within the injection is a lipid nanoparticle that encompasses a piece of messenger RNA. And this messenger RNA encodes the instructions for how to make the viral spike protein. So once it gets inside the cell will then make the protein based on those instructions and present it to the immune system. The immune system then makes antibodies that are basically the way of the body of remembering that protein and being ready for the virus should it ever infect us. So instead of in the past vaccines that have been approved, rather than having this lipid nanoparticle with the messenger RNA, it's either the whole virus or a small part of the virus or a viral protein. And so by using the messenger RNA, we're giving the instructions to the cell to make the viral protein, but not the whole virus itself. So I think another reason that people are leery or want to have more information about the safety of the vaccine is because of the shortened timeline from the inception or the conception of the idea through to when the vaccine's available to the public. So this is a timeline from the New York Times showing a typical vaccine timeline. And as you can see from the top here, it spans over a decade from when the research on the vaccine technology is done to the preclinical stage. This would be things like cell studies or animal studies, and then to the different phases of the clinical trials, to manufacturing it, getting it approved, and distributing it. So in the current situation, many of these different stages have been done at the same time or overlapping timeframes. And this is one of the ways in which we're able to get a vaccine available for this new virus in less than a year. So one of the things for people to understand is that none of these stages have been done less than a previous vaccine timeline. It's just that they have been done simultaneously. And one of the ways that was made possible was by huge amounts of money from the federal government being put into these to be able to get them done so quickly. And in fact, for example, the companies started building factories and manufacturing the first doses of the vaccine before the clinical trials were finished. Now, in a normal situation, that would be impossible because they would be at risk of losing too much money if the trials failed. But because it was being backed by the federal government through the Project Warp Speed or through, like for example, Pfizer didn't take originally any money through Project Warp Speed, but they did put a huge amount of money into these phases ahead of time. And the reason for that is because it's a global pandemic. It's a 1 in 100-year situation. As you can see, it's impacting everybody's lives, reducing our normal activities and so forth. So I just wanted to emphasize to folks that the normal stages were done. They were just done simultaneously rather than having them strung out in time. So the way that we determine safety and efficacy of vaccines is through randomized control trials. So when someone's talking about a phase 3 trial, they're talking about a randomized control trial. And in these trials, participants are recruited to be tested for vaccine safety and efficacy. So for the Pfizer vaccine, there were over 40,000 participants who were recruited. And for the Moderna vaccine, there were over 30,000 participants who were recruited. Once they're recruited to the study, they're randomized into getting the vaccine or the placebo. And then they start getting administered the vaccine and then being followed up to monitor for safety and efficacy outcomes. So in the Pfizer vaccine, that's the one that's currently being distributed in Brookings. So our frontline healthcare workers and folks who work in long-term care facilities started last week getting vaccinated by the Pfizer mRNA vaccine. But during the phase 3 randomized control trial, half of the participants got the vaccine, half got the placebo. Then after 21 days, they got the second injection and then were monitored for 2 months for these different outcomes. So as we talked about last week, they were monitored for symptoms of COVID and tested to see if they had COVID. But they were also monitored for other side effects that would not be related to getting the disease COVID, but from the vaccine itself. And those include, there are kind of 3 different categories of side effects. Local events, those are things that would happen at the injection site, so in the arm where the vaccine was injected. That includes pain, redness, and swelling. The second category of side effects is systemic events. So those are things that you could feel in your whole body, things like fever, aches and pains, tiredness. And then there's a third category of side effects, which are called adverse events. So these are sort of unexpected or unwanted adverse effects, and they would include things like anaphylaxis, difficulty breathing, or any other thing that may be caused by the vaccine itself. So, so that's how the study was conducted to determine if the vaccines were safe. Now, I'll just mention a few sort of principles about vaccination. One is that we expect the vast majority of side effects to happen within the first few days of receiving the vaccine. And that the longer you get from the time of the injections, the less likely it would be to have any side effects. So the vast majority of these things will happen to people within a few hours or days of getting vaccinated. And the other thing is that because the whole point of the vaccine is to cause an immune reaction, we do expect these things to happen. So injection site pain, redness, and swelling, you could call it a side effect, but it's actually an indication of a robust immune response to the vaccine and a sign that it's actually working. So this is a table, or a graph, sorry, showing local events in the vaccine groups. And it's broken down by the younger age group and the older age group, after dose 1 and after dose 2. So on the left-hand side here is the younger age group, people aged 60 to 55 years. After dose 1, 83% had pain at injection site, where only 14% who got the saline placebo had pain at injection site. So that indicates that the majority of people in this younger age group who had the vaccine got pain at injection site. There was also a small percentage of people who had redness and swelling, and there is more in the vaccinated group than in the placebo. There are similar rates of these local events after the second dose, and there are similar rates in the older age group as well. But you can see, if you compare the younger to the older, that the older folks have slightly less local events following vaccination. And that's because the older we are, the less robust our immune response is. So it would also be an indication potentially that because younger folks have a more robust immune response, the vaccine may work better in them. The older folks may not have quite as good of a response to the vaccine, but will have fewer side effects. So overall, I would say these local events are very expected. There are slightly more people in the younger age groups that have them compared to the older. This is a graph showing the systemic events in following vaccination in the younger age group, people aged 16 to 55. So you can see here that the two most prevalent systemic events were fatigue and headache. And there was 47% of people who got the vaccine compared to 33% of the people who got the placebo who had fatigue, and 42% compared to 34% who reported headache. So it kind of shows us that lots of us are tired and have headaches, and that there's more in the vaccine group than in the placebo group. The placebo group are people who, instead of getting the real vaccine, they get a saline injection. So it's just basically salt water. And this is not expected to cause any protection against COVID-19 or any side effects. So by comparing the outcomes in the vaccinated group compared to the placebo group, we can determine both, one, if the vaccine is efficacious, and two, what of the side effects can be attributed to the vaccine versus placebo. So in some of these cases, you can see, like vomiting, there was equal amounts of people reporting vomiting in the vaccine group compared to the placebo. So that would lead us to believe that these 1% of people reporting vomiting following the vaccine is just part of normal daily life and not anything special to receiving the vaccine. So overall, we can see that there are systemic events following vaccination, and some of them are higher in the vaccinated group to the control group. Things like fatigue, headache, and chills are, again, things that would be expected based on a person mounting a robust immune response. Just like when we get sickness and we have fatigue or chills, when you get a vaccine and your immune system kicks in to make the antibodies that will protect us from the virus, there can be fatigue, headache, and chills, as well as muscle pain and joint pain. So that's why when you get vaccinated, you can expect to feel a little bit crummy for a few days afterward, probably about 24 hours total.
Which is better than weeks.
Right, of getting the actual vaccine. So the benefit of the vaccine is, right, these systemic events are very short-lived, they're predictable, and they're much less severe than it would be for the virus itself if we had a severe case of virus, and it also benefits the whole community by reducing the number of susceptible people in the population. This is the same data, but it's being shown with the folks who are over age 55. The trends are very similar from the younger age group, but overall the numbers are lower. Again, showing that the older folks have less systemic side effects than the younger folks. And I would attribute that to those older folks potentially having less robust immune response to the vaccine. So the last thing, also, these are just the conclusions. The local reactions were mostly mild to moderate in severity and resolve within 1 to 2 days. Systemic events were reported more often by the younger vaccine recipients than the older vaccine recipients. The most common reported systemic events were fatigue and headache. The adverse events were rare. Their percentages are so small that it doesn't really make sense to make graphs for them. But 64 vaccine recipients and 6 placebo recipients, so these are all both less than 0.5%, reported swollen lymph nodes. A few participants in either group had severe adverse events that led to withdrawal from the trial. 4 related serious adverse events were reported among the recipients. These include things like shoulder injury, lymph node swelling, arrhythmias, or paresthesia. That would be like tingling in your extremities. 2 of the vaccine recipients died, both from heart-related events, and 4 placebo recipients died during the time of the trial, 2 from unknown causes, 1 from hemorrhagic stroke, and 1 from a heart-related event. So none of these deaths were considered to be related to the vaccine or the placebo. But you can see why it's important to have the placebo group for comparison, because it helps to realize that some of these things just happen as part of normal life. So I just wanted to emphasize, I guess I can go back, emphasize a few things, that the side effects we expect to see sooner rather than later. These local events and even some of the systemic events are expected and a sign of a robust immune response. The adverse events that are reported are tracked in a federal database, so that even after this has this emergency use authorization, if there are new adverse events reported from the 20 million people who are going to be vaccinated in the United States last week and next week, we'll be able to see if there are something that was missed in the phase 3 clinical trial. So within a few weeks, we're going to have a lot of additional safety data because of all the people who are currently getting vaccinated. One question that we got from folks in the community was, if there were long-term side effects, what would we expect them to be? And the long-term side effects would be things like autoimmunity. And this would be a sign of having an robust immune response. So the thing with the vaccine is that you want to have enough immune response to make that long-lasting antibodies that will protect us, hopefully for years to come, from the virus. But if our immune system gets too excited by the virus, then it's potential that it could start making antibodies against parts of our own body. That would be an autoimmune response. So that would be the theoretical long-term consequence of the vaccine. But we don't have any indication in the data so far that that's an issue. The other adverse events that have been in the news lately were anaphylaxis following administration of the vaccine to some healthcare personnel in Alaska and also in the United Kingdom. So that I've seen so far, 4 cases of anaphylaxis reported. That's when your throat and your tongue, your airway starts to swell and people can't breathe. And it can actually, if it weren't treated, it could kill you. People might be aware of anaphylaxis, like if folks have a peanut allergy, it also causes a similar thing. So to treat anaphylaxis, you can take Benadryl, or in the really serious cases, they administer epinephrine. So of the 2 folks in Alaska who had anaphylaxis, they both had a history of anaphylactic reactions in their past, and they both carried EpiPens. So for folks who fit into that category, you want to make sure to stay at the clinic after you receive the vaccine so that people can make sure that you don't start having an anaphylactic reaction. These are things that will start within minutes of getting the vaccine. So that's why after we get our flu shots, for example, we stay for 15 minutes. It's to monitor for anaphylaxis. So that's an important part of the protocol that shouldn't be skipped. And that's so people are prepared for that possibility. One of the other questions that we had, or we saw on social media, were concerns that the vaccine could cause sterility in women of childbearing age. And there is absolutely no indication in any of this data that that's the case, nor is there really any biological plausibility to that. So, vaccines have been being given to people for decades or even centuries. So there's no reason for this vaccine to be any different than any other vaccine. But because of the timing of the clinical trials, women who were pregnant were not included in the trials. And so therefore, we don't have safety data on women who were pregnant. Part of the reason is because there wasn't time to complete the special animal studies on pregnant animals prior to enrolling women in the clinical trial. So, some countries like the United Kingdom, which rushed the approval for the vaccine a little faster than the United States did, did not approve the vaccine for women who were pregnant or who were planning to become pregnant in the next 3 months. Now, again, the reason for that is because there wasn't data on the safety of the vaccine in pregnant women. However, those animal studies have been completed, and they did show that there is no evidence of issues or side effects or adverse events in the pregnant animals who were administered the vaccine. We do know that there are risk to women who are pregnant who become infected with COVID-19. So when the FDA approved with the emergency use authorization, the mRNA vaccines for COVID-19, they're weighing the risks and benefits of the vaccine and the disease itself. So we know that there are no reported adverse effects in pregnant women, but we do know that the disease causes risks in pregnant women. So right now, the United States FDA did authorize these vaccines for use in pregnant women. And that's probably something that women should talk to their medical providers about before they make that decision, but it is not restricted by any means in this country. And I think the fact that the UK didn't approve it for pregnant women is the source of that rumor that it causes sterility. But I just was flabbergasted the first time I heard that rumor. There's really just no biological plausibility for it. And that was the only way I could make sense out of it. I will say that somebody suggested to me that there was just an overt concern about injecting RNA into their arm. And all I can say to that is, so it's the RNA, right, for the viral spike protein. If you get infected with COVID-19, you're getting the RNA for the viral spike protein as well as all of the other proteins of the virus. So if you really have a concern about getting viral RNA, then you really, really don't want to get the virus, because there's a lot more RNA in the virus than there would be in the vaccine.
Thank you, Natalie.